Overanalyze the movies. Well, hello everyone. Good evening and welcome to Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. Something that me and my co-host Jim are proud to say we go above and beyond the review, and last but certainly not least, the home of the best chat on the internet. Now, tonight, of course, we are going to be taking a deep dive into The Green Knight, starring Dev Patel. And so, of course, if you're here watching this already, you must like this stuff. So do me a solid and maybe smash that like button. All right. Now, before we get into the movie, we've got a couple of treats for you. One is one of our great friends, great friend of the show, regular part of the chat, regular collaborator, guest host, MC, just has done anything and everything, been a wonderful man, a man I am proud to call my internet buddy, is first of all going to be here to share half of his top 10 list of movies he's getting jazzed about this month for August. So we're going to find out what's on his radar. And then the other thing is, Jim, unfortunately, he's traveling right now. He's been in BC. He's traveling. He couldn't make it tonight. So this man was happy to pinch hit. I know he's going to do a great job for you. So, you know, enough blowing smoke up, you know what. It's time to welcome the man onto the show. Let us welcome Brian, a.k.a. Dragon Movie Guy. How you doing, man?
Hey, Rob, what's going on? It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is mine, and the only bummer, the only downside is Jim isn't here. You know what? When I reached out to him and said, hey, you know, maybe Brian, he's like, the only thing he was kind of bummed with was he wasn't able to hang with you as well. Let's get into it. As I said, we're going to try and keep this to a tight 2 hours.
Very true.
So why don't we find out, Brian? Why don't you tell us what's you've got a top 5 list of what's on your radar this month. Shall we get started?
Yes, absolutely. So today's August 1st, the first day of August, and I put together a top 10
Is that how that works?
Yeah, I've been told. We got a calendar and everything. So we have I put together a top 10 list of my top 10 movies I'm excited to watch in the month of August. And today we're talking about the top 5. And if you'd like to see the first 5 on my top 10 list, you can always check it out on my channel later on after we're done with the podcast here. So should we kick off with number 5?
Let's do it, baby.
Number 5 is Swan Song. This is basically a retirement version of Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, or Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which was the better version of that. This is Swan Song. It stars German actor Udo Kier. He is a retired hairstylist who is living in a retirement home, not too happy, and a friend of his passes away, and it's in the will for him to do her hair for her funeral. So he goes on a road trip, and he runs into some new people, some old people, and literally a friend who refers to him as the Liberace of Sandusky, as in Sandusky, Ohio. So
I loved that. That kind of got me hooked in the trailer.
Yeah.
That and Udo Kier, you don't really identify him with this kind of role in a North American set film.
Yeah, I'd never heard of him before. I had to look him up, and he kind of reminds me of, I'm blanking here, but the guy who played General Zod, who was in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, kind of reminded me a little bit of him in terms of that energy, that sort of that European style of masculine sort of thing. So seeing him in this role is really fun to watch in the trailer. So I'm looking forward to seeing that in the film. And that comes out, if I can look at my notes here, that comes out in theaters. I don't have it in my notes, but it's on my video. So Swan
All
Song.
right. It's coming out sometime this month.
It is coming out sometime
No
this
matter
month.
what, it's coming out sometime this month.
It's coming out. If I look at my notes,
You know what?
It's coming out August 6th.
Fantastic.
This Friday.
So this Friday. All right. Number 4 on your list. What
Number four on my list is one that I'm sure probably most people are looking forward to. If you're into lists like this thing, if you're huge into movies, of course, you're looking forward to The Suicide Squad or Suicide Squad 2. Not Suicide Squad 2. They didn't want to name it that, but The Suicide Squad. This one is
I'm referring to it as Suicide Squad 2021.
Yes, Suicide Squad 2021, and one directed by the actual person that should have directed it the first time, Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn. This is a film that brings back Harley Quinn, Colonel Rick Flag, and Viola Davis's character, and I think one or two others, but for the most part, it's almost a completely new cast. This is not really a proper sequel. It's a continuation in the same universe, but it's not the same group of characters doing just a straight sequel. So it is a lot of new characters. It's a lot of actors that you've seen before, a lot of famous actors that you might not even recognize unless you actually look at the credits and see who's going to be in this film, which is a huge laundry list of people. But we have a new cast. We have a new director who should have been the director in the first place. And it looks like it's a lot of fun. It doesn't look as much like people are just sort of posing and trying to look cool. And for some reason, it's a giant starfish this time, which if you look at the comics, was actually the first big villain in the first Justice League comic from way back in the 60s. I don't know much about comics, but that much I do know, that little nugget. So the fact that there's a giant starfish as the evil creature in this thing that they have to get together to fight is sort of interesting as well. And Idris Elba takes over as Bloodsport in this film, sort of reluctantly takes over. If you look at some of the trailers,
that was the character that Will Smith played in the first one, if memory serves.
I believe. No, that was something shot. It was Deadshot.
Oh, okay.
I think that was.
All right, I'm already rolling my eyes. Let's move on.
That was Deadshot. In the first one. So that's similar looking, similar
so
feel
just
character.
another generic. Yeah.
Well, he's a little bit more of a tough guy. I think Deadshot was a little bit more.
Yeah, you know what? We're already diving too deep into the lore
that's
of
true.
A bunch of characters no one's ever heard of. Unless they're really
true.
into it, and they don't need to hear us plug it.
And we have John Cena wearing a weird metal hat, and we have David Dastmalchian as Polka Dot Man. Never heard of the character, but
I've already moved on to the third man.
Yeah. So anyway, that comes out HBO Max this Friday, or this Thursday, August 5th. Number 3 on my list is Reminiscence with Hugh Jackman, the Man of Jack. This one sort of looks like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind meets Total Recall meets any Christopher Nolan type film. This is in the near future. Miami's all flooded out, and Hugh Jackman plays a character that can go in and take out bad memories, because in the future, with global warming and everything, humanity has so many bad memories that people sometimes just want to forget. And instead of just drinking or smoking their problems away, they actually go in and take the memory out. So this one sort of looks like it's a sci-fi, but also adventure and sort of a cerebral thought piece kind of thing. The effects look really good. It looks like something straight out of a Christopher Nolan film. It looks really good, and that one comes out on August 20th, also on HBO Max and in theaters.
I'll date myself. It also kind of reminds me of like Dreamscape, or even remember that Tarsem flick, Cell? Just this idea of going into the brain, going into the mind.
Oh, the Jennifer Lopez flick from the 90s? I did not see the one, but I saw the trailers for that years ago. So
All
that
right.
one looks pretty good. That's at number 3 on my list. Number 2 on my list, most years, most summers, it probably wouldn't be this high. But just because we haven't had very many comedies on my, in general, in theaters, this one makes it to number 2 because it's one of the few comedies, one of the few gross-out comedies. This is called Vacation Friends, and it's got John Cena and Lil Rel Howery. The idea is that Lil Rel Howery and his wife went to Mexico on vacation, and they met up with some friends, or they met some people, not pre-existing friends, but vacation friends, and
Got a
had
little
big old
wild
time. Yes. So now Lil Rel Howery and his fiance are planning the wedding. The family's there, and John Cena and Margaret Hegner decide to crash the wedding and are crashing the wedding. They're really, really obnoxious, but they may be speaking a bit of truth, as tends to be in these type of comedies. So it's sort of a gross out comedy. It's a rated R comedy. It's the kind of thing that's usually a guilty pleasure if it's done right. And it's number 2 on my list because I love comedies. We haven't really gotten a lot of chances to laugh the last year or two in general, and especially as streaming services have taken over. One of the casualties of that is studio level comedies. So we're not getting as many studio level comedies with a big budget and a big cast. And this is one of those that kind of fits in that category. So that is number 2 on my list, and it comes to theaters on August 27th.
On this one, isn't it also, like, at least on the poster, it also looks like they're going to do a simultaneous release on Hulu?
Yes. August 27th on Hulu. And that is a my boo-boo. I misread my own notes. You're right. That is an original film on Hulu. Forget the build-up for theaters part, but this one is Hulu for sure. Okay. It's right on the poster.
20.
Shows how prepared I am.
By Hulu. All right. You know what? It much like I want to say you helped us out back in May, and it was like, so glad to be back at the theaters. Let's talk about a bunch of Netflix films.
Yeah.
So this is just all more par for the course.
Yeah, and so everything I said is true, but this is on Hulu.
Gotcha. All right. Let's number 1, my friend.
Number 1 on my list, I guarantee if you've been watching TV, if you've been watching the Olympics, if you've been watching SportsCenter the last week or two, you've seen some of the ads for it. It is the Ryan Reynolds video game flick called Free Guy. The idea behind this is if you've ever had a friend that's played a multiplayer online game, sort of along the lines of World of Warcraft, or in this case, Grand Theft Auto, this is a huge online game where real people play in a shared world, and in that world there are non-playable characters or NPCs that are just sort of the generic things that you run into and usually blow up or shoot up or whatever. Ryan Reynolds plays one of those guys, and his name is Guy, or some people refer to him as Blue Shirt Guy because he's a teller at a bank. And this is just sort of one of those, and this has Jodie Comer as the love interest. Taika Waititi, the director of Thor Ragnarok. The director is not the director of this film, but he is in this film. He's the big video game developer in charge of this universe of video game characters. And it just looks like a lot of fun. They go in, have a lot of adventures, they blow stuff up, CGI effects everywhere. And, it's Ryan Reynolds, so of course it's Ryan.
This one reminds me of... It looks like a fun version of Gamer. Do you remember 2009? Was it Gerard Butler?
Yeah, and I think Dexter was in that one.
Except he's a human being being controlled by the player.
Yeah, that one was more. That one had Dexter in it. It had Michael C. Hall. That one reminded me a lot more of Surrogates, where it's people sort of as avatars, like real people, sort of thing.
Yeah.
This one is kind of. It looks like it's more.
Oh, you're in the game versus real life being the game.
Right. Versus playing, like Jodie Comer is the real life person and she's playing a character in the game, but it's her sitting at a computer desk playing a computer like we would in real life.
Well,
play a computer game. This
like
isn't
Gamer,
for-
except that it's like, remember Gamer? So
Mm-hmm.
what was his name? Certainly not Ludacris. Okay, Logan Lerman. So Logan
Yes.
Lerman plays Gerard Butler. Whereas, and then there'd be NPCs that just kind of did their thing. It was just a super dark film. People were
Yeah, that
really
was
shocked.
a
It
lot
was just-
darker. And I
Yeah.
believe in Gamer, most of the characters were actual real people.
oh, all of them were.
And they
Like,
had
there'd
like
be
little chips in their head.
NPCs. Oh yeah, that was the gag.
Yeah.
You know, here you're in a digital world. You know,
Yes.
like oh heck, this is like Tron.
Yeah, this
You know?
one's
Yeah.
but this one it's not like, and Tron is I think the characters are a little bit more sentient. This one they're not, and the thing that makes Ryan Reynolds' character stand out is that he somehow gains a little bit of sentience. So I think Gamer was a little
Well,
bit
he has
more.
friends though.
Yeah,
He
and-
has
and
friends.
this is true. He has the
His
friends.
friends
and-
help him out.
Yeah,
It's
Lil
all-
Rel Howery is in this one
Oh,
as
heck.
a supporting role too. So
What's Wreck-It Ralph? Again, another
Yes.
one
Very similar to Wreck-It Ralph
Like, I mean,
looking.
there's all we're starting, and this makes me think we're starting to see better video game movies every year.
Yes.
You know, everyone keeps saying no one can make a good one, and I'm like, I thought Jumanji, Welcome to the Dungeon did a great job, but even some of these other, you know, Gamer was a pretty generic. Well, I can't say generic because, but it didn't really move me, but it was noteworthy. I remember it. I remember the plot. I remember a lot for a movie that's 13 years old now. 12, 13 years old. So
It is, yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's weird to think that 2009 is 11, 12 years ago, but but this one doesn't look like it's any questions of morality or free will or that sort of thing, or people surrendering. This one just looks like it's a fun video game movie and a lot of pretty graphics flying at the screen and Ryan Reynolds being a smartass. So looks like a lot of fun. And that one comes out on August 13th.
as one does. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Everyone, you're watching this now or you're watching it later. You will find a link to the complete top 10 ranking of the movies that Brian is looking forward to. You'll find a link to that. You'll also find a link to his channel in the description. I believe, and I know you're. I've reached out to you on Twitter before, but you're a lot more active on Instagram, if memory serves. So I got your Instagram handle and your Twitter handle both in the description for you folks watching now or later in replay. You'll see his handle right on the screen right now. So with that out of the way, I'm going to shamelessly pull you off the screen for a bit, my friend, and take over as I have done before. It is kind of my thing. Bear with me, folks. Let me just make a little room here in the desktop. All right. As I said before, today we are going to be looking at The Green Knight. Let's see. From IMDb. Here's the logline from IMDb. A fantasy retelling of the medieval story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Oh, thank you for that accuracy. Here's the logline I wrote. All right. The king's nephew, Gawain, accepts the challenge of the Green Knight on Christmas Day, no less, and embarks on a quest for honor in this stylized retelling of the Arthurian legend. It was adapted and directed by David Lowery. It stars, of course, Dev Patel. It also stars Alicia Vikander, Joel Edgerton, Sarita Chowdhury, Sean Harris, Barry Cogan, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Ralph Ineson, and Kate Dickey. I will say this, the whole color scheme of all their posters and that reminds me of the color scheme of Bowfingers, the Eddie Murphy, Chubby Rain look-alike character. But anyway, back to the actual show. Now we'll get into the social nutrition checklist. But before I do that, I wanted to tell you, everyone, of course, I always start off in the social nutrition checklist with the Reframe project, the Reframe stamp, and the whole project. And I've had people ask me why we do it. I would tell you why we do it now. I have answered this question before, but I can do you one better. Next week, I reached out to the Reframe Project. Its executive director, Andrea Wilson Mirza, and she was happy happy to agree to an interview. So she's actually going to start the show next week. We're going to give about 10, 20 minutes at the top of next week's show, August 8th, to interview her, get a bit more history of the Reframe Project, why it was started, and we can have a discussion on why Jim and I use it on our show as part of our analysis of film. Anyway, so super excited about that. Make sure you pin that. Make sure you, if you haven't already, you subscribe to the channel so you can be updated. You can stay in the loop. It's going to be a great one. Now let's get back to this great show we were talking about. Oh, right, the social nutrition checklist. Speaking of Reframe stamp, would it get a Reframe stamp? No, it would not. Was it union made? I am not 100% sure. I've actually reached out, on Twitter, to a couple of Irish, because it was shot in Ireland. So I reached out to a couple of Irish film technician, TV technician, trade unions to find out if it was a unionized set. I don't know. So I really can't say one way or another. Let's move on. Does it pass the Bechdel test? I don't believe it does. Although there's one scene that may give you that impression, I will argue to the end of my days that it fails. But I won't get into it now. That would be spoiler zone territory, even though it's in the first act. So that's a big fat X there. And then last but certainly not least, is this a class-conscious film? No, again, it is not. It is an Arthurian legend. It's a reasonably faithful retelling of what would have been another 100 years prior, a chanson de geste, basically like the Song of Roland or something. So no, it's a bunch of nobles telling each other stories about how cool they are. So that gives us right now, because I don't know about the union made thing, I can only give it a score of 0, which I think is the second time in a row we've had a 0 or a 25%. Anyway, now with that out of the way, let's, I think I got everyone. Let's bring Brian back. Unmute the fellow. And, give us your quick review. Give us your 90-second, hey, this is what I thought of this flick, man.
I'm going to use one of your main phrases that I've sort of adopted because you use this phrase. This is a literal and figurative long, hard slog. I mean, it's one of those old school. He's literally slogging across the landscape, across through the bog, through the swamp, through the forest. It feels like that. This is a film that's 2 hours and 10 minutes long, but it feels like it's 4 hours long. I fell asleep, and this is just, I have to admit, I fell asleep 3 times. 3 whole times in the first hour of this film. I was fully caffeinated. I was ready to go. It was middle of the afternoon. It was a 3 o'clock something showing. I fell asleep 3 times in the first hour. So that just goes to show how slow of a slog this thing is. Yeah, no, it was not a good film. The fact that you already gave it 0 for 4 on the social checklist, I'd say as an entertainment value, that's what it was for me. So,
okay, all right.
3 times I fell asleep in the first hour. 3 times.
For myself, you know what? Yes, it is. It starts slow. It is a bit of a slog. That said, even though I do have problems with this film, and we'll get into them later as we get into the weeds, into the spoiler zone, I felt, Brian, that it starts slow and it just kind of remains sort of a plodding pace. That said, it is a moody psychological piece. It barely has a plot. Like, it really is a kind of, well, this happened, and then this, and this, and this, and then. But I think in part because it's not supposed to be, let us get into a great narrative, and more about a psychological look at the hero's journey. And so I kind of, in the end, I kind of came around on it. The first act, I was much like yourself, not falling asleep, but going, oh dear God, don't tell me this is it. By the end of it, I'm like, that wasn't bad. Couple days later, I went and saw it Friday evening. Couple days later, I'm like, that has more weight than I was willing to give it. And I think part of it is, but something that's really important, and this maybe is the time to, talk about whether or not I think it's worth someone's time. I would say to anyone in the audience, it is worth your time, but be prepared for more of a psychological exploration, a psychological character study, an exploration of manhood, than wow, there's an axe and it's knights, and so there must be, and it's King Arthur, so where's my action? That is not this movie. So, but I'd like to know, I think you gave us that answer, but I'll ask again. Do you think it's worth the audience's time, or you just think it's just too slow, just too...
No,
are you about to drift off again?
Wait, no, sorry. No, this I think you're being very kind by saying it's a psychological examination. Most of this film is him walking through the woods, and literally what they'll do with the camera, and they do this several times.
Well, there's some moors.
They have
and a swamp.
They literally have him walking, and they'll do like a 360 slow pan around for no real reason other than just to show, it's cloudy weather here too. I don't get me wrong, I love the fact that they actually went and shot on location. I love the fact that they're using a lot of practical effects in the filmmaking of this, and the costumes look really good. But it's
short
so
answer, yay or nay?
No.
Worth the audience's time? No. And I would actually push back a little bit on the psychological part, because I don't really think he's contemplating that much. There's not a whole lot of inner struggle or anything for him to go through that would be more of the psychological part of it. Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that argument. I guess now we're folks, we're about to enter into the spoiler zone. Heck, let's just say it. We are in the spoiler zone. We're in the spoiler zone.
Which
it's
is
like
our
Thunderdome, but different.
And that's our full screen graphic version of the Arthurian legend of having a full screen graphic that says, "And now the tale of the spoiler zone."
All right. So let's talk about craft first. The performances, the look, the feel, the sound, and everything. What were your thoughts? when you weren't asleep. What you saw of the film, awake and alert.
When I wasn't rendered unconscious by the sheer boredom from this flick. It's not poorly done. It's the costumes are good, the locations are good, they have a consistent look through it. The fact that a lot of the special effects are done practically, like someone actually in a costume on set, not everything, but some of it, it looks actually not awful. I found it weird that they were going for a really realistic look for a kind of surrealistic kind of film or story that they were trying to tell.
It was super stylized.
Yeah.
Or maybe not super stylized, but you're like, this isn't an actual, hey, we want to put you in a 1150 Normandy.
Well, I mean, some of it felt that way, that it was relatively realistic and on the ground.
Well,
and the costumes,
but not enough to say we want to put you there. They're like kind of going halfway.
At least at the beginning, it feels pretty grounded. Like the crown that they're all wearing looks like something they might wear. I mean, it doesn't necessarily look like it's period accurate, but it definitely looks like it exists and it's there and it's physically there. It doesn't look like there's a CGI crown on top of his head.
Oh, I'm not talking about the actual physical thing. I'm more talking about the style in which they chose. Like, the church isn't a church. It's like no medieval church you'd ever see, but it kind of looks like one. That was more what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Like, it's stylized. It's not medieval. It's in the style of, like neo-medieval or something, And do you know that distinction I'm trying to make?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it didn't feel like they went medieval on our sensibilities, but it kind of did with the boredom aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, it felt like a relatively grounded, or what would feel grounded, at least to a 21st century film viewer. But as the film goes along, it gets more and more surreal and ethereal kind of a feel to it. So it's not horrible, the visuals. It's boring and slow and a slog. It's just...
Well, okay, I'm going to come back to the craft here.
Yeah.
So, cinematography. Boring?
Boring, but well done for what it is. I mean, I think they executed it pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, let's just talk about the nuts and bolts, the performances.
Yeah. Not particularly great. I thought Dev Patel did a really good job. I thought it was interesting that he was playing a knight in King Arthur's court. I thought the Dev Patel's performance was pretty strong overall. Mm-hmm. He was playing a real douchebag of a character, a medieval douchebag,
a callow youth.
Yes, very callow. A bit of a douchebag, a bit of a womanizer, someone who wants the credit but hasn't earned anything. And his portrayal of that was pretty well done.
Yeah. What about the soundtrack? A lot of choral, a lot of choral music, a lot of almost operatic, eh?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, choral's a very good way of putting it. I think that might have been that might have helped put me to sleep. It's very ethereal and yeah, the soundtrack is pretty good. The overall sound effects are pretty good overall. Yeah, it was pretty strong.
Yeah. I agree with you okay, maybe I'll start from the top. For myself, like all these movies, as soon as you get a decent enough budget and a decent enough caliber of cast, it's going to be shot well. It's going to have what's the word I'm looking for? All the performances are going to be fine. Whether or not we like the performance or the style or how it's calibrated to the story, that's like almost a manner of taste, or we get into a subjective realm. But it's not like I ever felt any of the players were like, is my check here? Oh, I thought we heard lunch. What? I could have sworn we heard the lunch call. What am I still doing in makeup? nor did it look like anyone was trying to chew up scenery. The sound, everything, what I would say about the whole craft of the piece is it seemed unified. It all seemed of a piece of a certain vision. There was a lot of color, on purpose color. And this is what I mean about stylized. It wasn't so much it seemed olden timey, but different enough so that you didn't think, oh, wait, this is like I'm going to see what knights actually do in that. It was very much a mythologized, stylized world we were entering. And and I really meant it, like right from as they were going up to the church, which is where the round table is in, and it's like, well, that doesn't work that way. And it's got and this is how picky I'm getting. It's like, well, that's a Gothic arch, but this is like a Romanesque church where there's no fucking windows except like one. Where it's like, that isn't the way they were building that, all right, I get it. This is not going to be, it's going to be a stylized vision. But I think that's kind of what whether you like the film or not, I think you can say it's like everything seemed to be a unit. Like the costume designer was in sync with the cinematographer, who was in sync with the sound design, who was in sync with the composers, and the performances were all in sync. You felt from the get-go, just at the look and the feel of the film, that it's like, this is what the director wanted. No way is this like 5 different departments just doing whatever the fuck they feel like.
Well, if we're sarcastically, I would say if it does sort of feel like a lot of the people working, the artisans, the craftsmen, the actors working on this set probably were like, well, this is what the director wanted, so they all begrudgingly went along with the director's vision. I think there is more. I got to push back a little there. I think if everyone's just phoning it in, well, this is what the director wants. I think you can feel that. I don't think I felt that. I think everyone got to be arty because the arty director came in and said, I have a vision and there's going to be green and it's going to have different hues. And everyone bought into it because they're all artists and they're all like, I can get behind this. This is not a generic Hollywood actioner. And again, that is not to knock the generic Hollywood actioner or to praise this film. But I do think that it showed a unified vision, and I would argue a crew, especially at the department head level and at the cinematographer level, where they're like, no, sounds good to me. This is what we're doing. I'll give you saturated yellowy golds. I can do that. Like, whether you like it or not, Brian, I don't think it's fair to the filmmaker to go, well, everyone just did what the director wanted. Well, I don't think that people are phoning it in and not giving a full effort. I do think they are being professional, and I thought it looked like a professional job. It didn't look, and it did look like everyone was on the same page. So I don't mean to say that it didn't seem like people were on the same page, but it felt like they were using the word verdant for green.
Oh,
you're right. There's a lot of green, but you know what I mean? Like
well, and not just hue.
Yeah,
would have been discussed.
The kind of auteur that would want to, the kind of auteur that wants you to know that they're an auteur, so they use the word verdant a lot. Yeah. And when they say verdant, we're like, we need to be more verdant over here and more verdant over there, and like that type of person that like
I think we can. But I think we can separate that from the demonstration of verdancy in the craft of the film. Do you know what I mean? Like, and we have a whole section on whether or not we thought the director passed or failed.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let me ask you this before we move on to story. Do you think what you saw, heard, how it was acted was pretentious?
No.
Like, I think you can, because I think you could say that I'm not saying it, but I think you could say that while not saying that Alicia Vikander's performance was pretentious. Like I do. I thought the way everyone was in sync, they were all, not one player seemed to be acting in a different movie.
No, I agree 100%. I thought the actors were well cast. I thought they did a good job. I thought they were on the same page. Thought they all kind of created a similar type feel to the scenes that they were in. It felt like they were acting and reacting to each other. I liked the actor playing King Arthur. He was the villain in one of the Mission Impossible films that sort of had a really nasally kind of quality to his voice in the Mission Impossible film. Did a great job as King Arthur, even though they never used the name King Arthur. I thought most of the actors, especially Alicia Vikander playing a couple different roles, did a good job playing distinctly different roles, and yet still it's her face on the screen.
It was not Kate Dickie. She was the queen. Where are we? Oh, pardon my. Oh, Sean Harris played the king.
Yeah, he was the guy in the Mission Impossible movie that was the bad programmer and got kidnapped. Anyway, yeah.
Yes. Mission Impossible Fallout.
Yeah, with the monologue over the trailer, "We're taking you down, Ethan." It's my bad Sean Harris impersonation.
Okay.
No, I thought he did a good job though as King Arthur, and I thought that Joel Edgerton did a really good job as, I don't even know what his character was, but he was
the
knight,
Lord.
The Lord of the manor. Halfway through,
sometimes they're referred to as the king and queen, like of that, but the Lord, Lord and the lady in this.
I thought that he was supposed to be Alicia Vikander's dad in that respite part halfway through, but apparently he was supposed to be her husband. So
yeah, they're husband and wife, which is why she gives him something, and then he's got to give it to him, and it gets a little weird and kicky. All right, which is, I think, perfect excuse to move towards story. I
think. Transition.
Well, I'll start with this one. I think one of the reasons it goes so slowly is that you never it doesn't. Well, it's got a plot, but it's not much of one. It kind of just you do have a start. The character is established as a callow youth. We're well in the spoiler zone. Dev Patel as Gawain we are introduced to him in a whorehouse, in a brothel. And then he's got to go to church. He can't even, as he chases after this sex worker, it might be his girlfriend or who the hell knows, Alicia Vikander as Essel, as she's playing that role. And basically, come on, all right, I'll give you a lift. Like, he's being such a great guy. He's a callow youth. He drinks. He's just, like any other rich kid, being an asshole, And I think that's like the douchebag in him is established well. And then we have this moment where he's kind of, the king is asking him on this Christmas day. It's like, I barely know you, my nephew. Tell me something about yourself. And he's like, I haven't done anything. That's right, you haven't. And, cue Green Knight to challenge him. And then after that, it's more of the same. And then he finally gets off his ass to go get his honor. And at no time do you feel like like you're getting on a faster moving train until the end. There's no real twists or turns. Like, they're all like more like little episodes. And again, they're more about him being internally tested. It's more about his character than anything kind of his competence as a warrior or anything. It's all about, has is he growing up? And that makes for a pretty light plot. Not really a plot-driven thing where we learn clues, and I think that can make for a really boring film if not handled well. Would that be a good assessment of part of the, let's say, a problem in one's eyes, not necessarily a problem in others, but...
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the story was incongruent or went against itself or anything along those lines. I would say, though, that...
It's a great thing about barely having a plot. It's this happened, then this happened.
I mean, you could
challenge me.
you could make an argument that he was on the classic hero's journey, and that this was one of those where
hero's journey.
Yeah, and it was the idea behind all of the different scenes throughout it were different, episodes of being along the hero's journey. The entire time,
Threshold Guardian.
The entire time while I was watching that, though, I kept thinking of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So whenever they had a full screen of and now the tale of Maleficent or Malicent or Melissa or whatever, I kept thinking of the slightly sarcastic version that Monty Python and their whole crew did in Holy Grail, and except this one was it's a drama, it's trying to be taken seriously, and yet I couldn't take it seriously because to me all of the all the way that it was shot was supposed to be more grounded, but if you're going for that sort of a tale sort of thing, to me that needs to be a little bit more elevated. Because that style doesn't work with a relatively grounded style, which is what it felt like.
I felt it was stylized enough that you were in myth country. I was okay with its level. It's not hyper realism. There's real, and then they pull back a bit. They pull back enough that I'm like, no, I'm in the world of myth and adventure. I was buying that part. Do you think though? And I do. I would say, yeah, it follows the hero. It follows the hero's journey as told by Carl Jung. Like it's super individual about this young man becoming a man. Versus I will save the kingdom. The only person being saved is himself.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. That I wouldn't think that there's anything. There's nothing noble about what he's, and not even noble in a royalty sort of way. There's nothing outside of himself that's really motivating him, I don't think, to go on this quest, to go on this journey. Yeah, you're right. There's nothing really altruistic about it. It's and the way they do it visually, they kind of gradually move into the ethereal, into the the mythical kind of thing. Like for example, the scene where he discovers the ghost, the spirit, where he has to dive into the lake to get the skull. It's
Winifred's head.
Yeah, exactly. Winifred. There we go. I was thinking Maleficent or Melissa or whatever, but yeah, Winifred. That whole scene, there's nothing poorly done about it. It's just so slow. It reminded me a lot of like 70s British cinema. It kind of had that feel of like Under the Skin.
It's super
the Scarlett Johansson movie. Like it's so slow and so internal. It's such a slog. I mean, and you were saying it's not like there's big battle scenes or fights. It's not even that he's running
or even
riding a horse
twist
across country. There's not even like he's on a train or a plane. He's walking most of the time.
There's no. The only time you hear a tick is when, every now and then there's a sound cue, whether it's the dripping of water, that wheel and that weird play for children, which again was like so kind of realistic, the Punch and Judy kind of stick play, kids play thing. But I think that's part of everything's on purpose here. Even if we look at the narrative, if we're to be so complimentary, Well, maybe not. You know what? I don't want to knock it, actually. I think it's a choice, and in part to kind of go, now we will look at the Herald. This is his opportunity to become a man. And he takes this challenge, and then he still pisses ways the whole year. You'd think he'd spend the year, hey, maybe I should get some skills before I go off and meet the Green Knight. Nope, I'm still going to get drunk. I'm going to sleep with the woman I've been sleeping with for a year, still not commit to her because I'm still kind of a spoiled brat. But I wonder if, and this might be slipping in a meaning, but I think that's a part of the point of the story is he's received this call. It's like, yeah, you're in your final year of high school. And it's like, ooh, I better pick up my socks if I want to get into university. Oh, well. Or I could keep screwing around.
Yeah, and who doesn't have a little bit of senioritis? So yeah, I guess I could see a little bit of that.
Well, no, I'm just kind of spitballing here. Like I do think this is all very story-wise intentional to, in a way, that you are stuck in the scene. That the idea is for you as an audience member to kind of go, okay, we're with the Saint Winifred. And everything's going to be about getting through this, period. Like nothing that's come before, nothing that will come after matters. Right now, it's just this. And we sit there like Jim would, as you know, Jim loves to talk about how a scene breathes. These scenes are given a lot of air. Lots. And lots. Plenty of time for deep breaths.
and I am a huge proponent of letting scenes breathe. I think a ton of films don't do that, whether it's the studio or the director. You look at Tenet as being a film where scenes don't breathe. But there's a difference between following the national. Yes, I do think.
Hey, one more. Hold. Exhale. Continue to exhale.
We are waiting to exhale.
Now, where are we?
But to me, though, there's a difference between letting a scene play out, letting it breathe, and just having to breathe from boredom because there's nothing going on in the scene. Mm-hmm. It is interesting to note too that the director of this film directed Pete's Dragon and A Ghost Story before this, which were both relatively well-received films. I have not seen either of them, but I do think that those are interesting film titles that inform this film, given that this film does deal with some ghosts and supernatural elements to it, and some animation with the Rocket Raccoon type character in there. But this, there's. And you're right. There's nothing accidental about this film. I do think that this is a film that was constructed very specifically. There's an idea behind it. I just don't think the idea was a very good idea. I think everyone executed the vision, but the vision was so slow and so just sort of plodding. And what's the point to it? That if I'm someone that loves director's cuts and extended scenes and deleted scenes, if I'm sitting there going,
We've seen everything.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm someone that feels like I need smelling salts to stay awake to watch this film, it's not a good sign.
Yeah, I think the story, it's as far as the story goes. Yeah, I think it's psychological, it's meditative, it's mood, and I think every scene is, made that way to make sure that you get the most out of that scene, narratively or otherwise. It has a lot. Like and yeah, it's funny. We're kind of disagreeing here, my friend, but in a way we're not. Oh my goodness, we actually have people in the chat.
Yay.
What? Wait, what?
Oh, Sean, lost in the reels here.
Yeah, we got Richard and Katie.
Richard and Katie. Hey.
And then, oh my goodness, not only the hardest working man on the YouTube film beat, but also a man impossible to stay mad at. Let us welcome to the chat the man, the myth, the legend, Sean from Lost in the Reel.
Yay.
Now, before we get to the chat comments, although Richard's will be pretty easy. Apparently, him and Katie, who I believe might have went camping or something, this weekend, visiting relatives. There might have been open water, and it's been hot, so I can understand why they didn't catch this flick. But great to see you guys here. Yeah, I think as far as the story goes, it's interesting. It's one of those things, whether you like the film or not, if the story, everything does fit. I don't think it's an example of bad storytelling. Like, there's nothing where you go, well, that doesn't make any sense, or wait, what? You set that up? Why did you not pay that off? Except for a brief thing, and I was dying to ask you. I made sure I wrote a couple of notes. So before we move into the meaning, I got to ask you this. But otherwise, you can say it's I think they can either say, yeah, I get that the story is part of a piece. I just didn't like this. I didn't like it. You know, it was too slow for my taste. I want a narrative. I don't want but I think the way, if you look at everything in it, yeah, it's I can't call it bad though. Do you know what I mean? Like it's almost like saying Picasso. Well, that's bad art. That's a bad picture. It's like you can't call Picasso bad, but you can say, yeah, not my thing. Would you agree with that? Or do you think it's actually kind of, hey, this story is a bad story?
I don't think it's a bad story. I think I don't know a lot about Arthurian legend. You know, I've never done a deep dive in that other than just watching movies about King Arthur and First Night and all those type things.
He's got to go to
class. Here.
And he's going. He came in.
And he's going.
It's like he's walking in one side of the... Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Good to see you. And then he picks up his coat. His coat didn't even get cold. It's like in and out. Sorry, say that again, my friend.
So, you know, I am the farthest thing from an Arthurian legend expert as there is. The only real thing I've known about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table is watching movies and TV shows about the subject and finding a lot of them entertaining. Like I love the Sean Connery movie First Night. I mean, it's not grand cinema, but it is, it's entertaining. This is not a poorly done story. This might be grounded in a lot of Arthurian legend, or it sort of feels like that's what that was based off of. It's not poorly done. It's just it's so slow and nothing's going on, to where even I was getting impatient watching this film. This is one of those films that I feel like if a studio had gotten in charge of this, that they would chop it down to an hour and 20 minutes instead of 2 hours and 10 minutes. And to me, that would have
it would have been like literally, why did we buy this?
It would have more of a feel to it. And then
who is going to watch this?
Yeah, I mean, like for example, if you watch, in my mind, this film, if the pacing of it is going to feel like the 4.5-hour Kevin Costner take on Dances with Wolves, it's that slow and plotting. But the 4.5-hour version of Dances with Wolves is really well done. You get sucked into the world. and you gain things from all of that time spent with those characters. I don't feel like you get any of that in this film. Even on a journey, even on a road trip journey, even going out and finding oneself, all that. To me, I didn't get any of that. I didn't get any character growth. I didn't get any, like, he was on a journey. He was walking, he was doing a bunch of stuff, but I didn't feel like his character was really going through anything that led to any growth or was impactful on him or had any sort of a long-term feel to the character. That's not a slam on Dev Patel. I think that goes along with the directorial vision, but that directorial vision,
you're getting into meaning, I think, now. I do, at every stage, he fails, let's say. He fails a little bit at every stage.
Dev Patel's character?
Yeah, Dev Patel's character fails a little bit. He gets through, he muddles through, but he does not, at no time does he show the character until the very end that kind of, he finally learned, which can be a metaphor for life. But I think in every scene, there is that there. There is that, first of all, he basically waits till the last absolute minute to go. He cannot be a good guy, and each scene is sort of a choice. And I'm talking about just after he has accepted the challenge by cutting the Green Knight's head off, like only an idiot kid would, knowing, hey, you equal measure, and he's obviously magical. But each scene, there is or pretty much every scene where there's any kind of conflict, there's a choice, and he doesn't make the right choice. First, when he gets to the battlefield, and he asks the scavenger a favor, scavenger has to kind of go, hey, a little something for my trouble. Like, he has to encourage it, whereas a chivalrous knight would be, here, young man, or get on my horse. We will travel. Like, and so he flips a coin. So of course he gets robbed. Later on, he has to be guilt tripped to share with the fox, who's basically, saving his ass. Saint Winifred, who's like, first of all, sleeps in her bed, like a certain Goldilocks we know, then wants to touch her and then goes, what's in it for me? At every stage he's failing. And so when he gets to the end and has this future vision epiphany, it's almost like this is the result of all your never once just accepting the challenge for what it is, giving of yourself completely. And I think that is where the story does. Each scene does have a purpose. It has a narrative purpose, because there's always a choice, which he always makes the wrong choice or kind of tries to weasel his way through. It's why he's such a on one level, a dislikable character, but you still want to see him. It's like, fuck, buddy, get your head out of your ass. So I do think, and so I don't think the story doesn't have that character, those character challenges. And it could have easily a little bit of a twist. And in a way, we saw the story as though it was a tragedy. Like in their whole sort of third act, the vision he has of his future, if he doesn't get rid of the girdle, the belt, the green belt, the verdant belt. If he doesn't get rid of it, how his life is going to play out and how it'll all blow up in his face. I do think we get that. I think and that would be about the only story criticism I have of this. Like, as far as from a storytelling perspective, I thought it was kind of like, why is it all in the, I had a dream and saw kind of a Scrooge-esque epiphany of, oh, this is, it's like a whole kind of, like probably half of the third act where we kind of see how his life would play out if he doesn't change his ways. Whereas I think the way it was done in A Christmas Carol was more effective. So if I have a criticism of its storytelling, it's that dream, what I think you could write off as a dream sequence. Where it's like, it all goes to shit because he's such a weasel. And it's like, well, I know how this ends, so it ain't going to end this way. So I think I'm in a dream sequence, which is such, like, I don't like that. I'd like to have seen him more be challenged and changed over the course of, or even maybe have some flashbacks to see some of that growth you're talking about. But I kind of get that that's not the way, it's not the way the legend went. It's certainly not the way Lowery wanted to go. But there would be my one criticism of the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good analysis. I actually liked the Ghost of Christmas Future sort of feel to it.
Yeah.
That sort of feel to it at the end, where it was sort of,
it did pick up the pace.
Yeah, and it picked up the pace, and there was actually stuff going on, and we actually see a little bit more character along with the action. I didn't think the pacing was too fast or too slow. A lot of times when you're seeing those flash forwards, they tend to be very too quickly done. I thought that would actually was a good example of having a lot of story to cover, but also letting it breathe well. But I go back to the character itself being one that I like to say it's him being a son, him not being an SOB. He's not being an SOB, but he is being a son of the rich, where the parents are the ones that
a spoiled child.
Yeah, and well, I mean, you don't have to be wealthy to be spoiled. But in the case where parents are the ones that, yes, but when you have people that are self-made and have earned their way in life, and then it's not so much that they spoil their child, but the child grows up a douchebag because he hasn't earned anything and hasn't built anything, and he coasts off his parents' success. That's sort of what it felt like Dev Patel was putting into this character. Or
maybe I think that's applying, like you see it in. You do see a bit of this in well, not even a legend. It was a written story, set as a legend, but was probably just plain written to entertain the nobility. Very much of the era of chivalry, and I don't mean that as a positive, but I think that's it's a good excuse to move into meaning. But I think, first of all, we've got a couple of points that Sean brought up, and he first of all is thanking you, Brian, OMG Brian, thank you for bringing up Under the Skin and this movie being a total slog. And he goes on further to say he can't wrap his head around the love for this film, probably Sean's biggest disappointment of the year. I think I can explain the love for this film in a second. Lost in the dream sequence was longer than the epilogue from The Return of the King. Well, here's the thing though, the dream sequence, although it took up a fair chunk of the third act, maybe all of it, or damn near all. Well, no, it must have been damn near all of it. Half of it, at least. But at least it moved. It had a beat to it, right?
There's a rhythm to it, absolutely.
Yeah. And then I think he's agreeing with you regarding nepotism. Here is I will explain why it's getting the love. And this is notwithstanding my, in the end, kind of, I'm feeling, I've got some significant criticisms that will come up in meaning, but I'm actually kind of feeling some love for this flick. But I suspect most of the love for this film is you're going to have one group of folks where they get to go, oh, the green, the symbolism of green, and the blue, and this is what it meant. And, there'll be all that stuff, right? So some folks will just love it because they get to talk about that. The lush cinematography, it is meant for critics with a thesaurus. A thesaurus. Ah. I think the other group this will appeal to are let's call them must be, it's got a lot of great actors in it, and it's got this guy who's gotten all this indie crad. Must be something in it. I'm gonna like it. And then, of course, there's the third crowd, which I'm gonna put myself in. I think I've always enjoyed these films that reference. Although I've been getting more into folk tales of late, I kind of dig the hero's journey. I don't think it's the only way you can tell a story. The monomyth is kind of been misinterpreted, what Campbell said about that. But I do think that there's, and it's interesting to see such a very clear and overt and stylistic implementation of it. And so there's something in the that satisfies my own intellectual pretensions. And so I think that's the love for this film. It is not by any stretch of the imagination a film meant to entertain. In no way was he hoping people would go out and go, fuck, that was great, wasn't it? I had so much fun. Can't wait to see it again. This is meant for film students to go, yes, I see what you mean. You can almost, nobody smokes anymore, or if they are, but 20 years ago, or if this film came out 40, 50 years ago, you got a guy with a pipe. The 21-year-old with a pipe going, oh, well, this reminds me of the cinematography of, do you know what I mean? I think I think that's part of what's going on here.
Yeah, but part of it is that it was so slow. I felt like I started watching this film 20 years ago.
Not the first, and Kubrick was such a fast-paced,
Well, no, but if you look at Kubrick,
think of the pacing in 2001: Space Odyssey.
There's stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on in
what?
2001. Visuals. You're in outer space. You're walking around a big thing, and you got the big glowing. I don't think so, Dave. All that kind of stuff. But in this one, we don't.
There's lots to look at in this one too, but it's not exactly a fast-paced, plot-driven action film. This is not what this is, and I think it's kind of like Errol Morris or Robert Malick. Is it Robert Malick or Terrence Malick? Terrence Malick. You know what? This guy has a particular style, and this is the movie he's going to make, like it or not. And again, I don't think he got up in the morning and said, this will be the one that really puts asses in the seats. This is an entertainer. Bring the whole family.
Well, look, this is a film that is probably as anti-Transformers and Michael Bay as you could possibly get with filmmaking. But I don't think that this is one that was.
I don't know. I think Michael Bay can be as boring as this. Easy.
Well, yeah, boring in its sugary.
There's different kind of slogs.
Yeah, but at least Michael Bay is meant to be entertaining and popcorn and that sort of. This I didn't get the other feeling as well of I didn't get this as being like a Terrence Malick, this is being so artistic that it's confusing and boring and just flashing things at the camera and just for art school
maybe
students.
Maybe not as what's the communicating through. It's not a tone poem, you bet. But when I say Terrence Malick or Errol Morris, more of a very distinct style that doesn't necessarily care whether or not you think you were entertained. More, but did it act on you later or some horse shit like that? Listen, because we don't have much time, let's get into the meaning, which is really where I have most of my beef with this flick. What do you think it meant? What was the point of this movie? What do you think he was trying to say?
I think the point he was trying to make was that even douchebags can be redeemed. It's the douchebag redemption. But I think it's an attempt at the hero's journey that falls flat for me. It's so slow. It's purposely done.
Okay, wait. Let's not. You keep circling back to your primary complaint. What do you think it meant?
The meaning,
whether or not you like it. We know you don't like it. You've made that abundantly clear. And you forever just want to say, what, that acting? Well, let's talk about how slow the film is. Yeah, but what about the acting? Or what about this? So let's get to the meaning. What do you think the movie meant? What do you think whether you thought it was done well or done poorly, or you're just too bored to care, what do you think it meant?
I think it was an exploration of masculinity and that whole nobility thing, growing up, taking responsibility, and it just no. I don't think there's a ton of meaning here. I don't think that there's some grand moral play at moralistic statement being made. I just think it's a flat story with very little meaning. Honestly, I don't think there's a ton. There's not being a whole lot proselytized here.
Yeah. Well, I think everything it's deeply proselytizing, and it may be one of the weaknesses is that it's more meaning than story. Overtly, it's about this idea of honor. He is a callow youth. When is he going to grow up? Like, literally down to the fact that his own mother gets together with her witch friends to call the night. And obviously is colluding with the uncle so that he's forced on this potentially this potentially deadly adventure to make him a man. I would, though, and here's where I get into the problem with this film. First of all, and I think it's really important for everyone to understand where, and this, you had chansons de guerre like the Song of Roland. Then this, as these courts became a little less violent, but still pretty violent, it was mostly these Kniggets beating the hell out of each other. And then when they got to party, there'd be somebody to tell them a story about how great it was to live the life of beating the hell out of each other. And then, of course, these women going, okay, what could we say in a way that will at least make sure that they treat us with some civility as they beat the hell out of each other, rape and pillage, and do all the terrible things that what is really a might makes right world does. But it very much is a story that was meant for nobles to hear when they were celebrating themselves. And so you get a narrative that is all about, well, you know what, this guy has to man up. And it goes down to, do you remember, this is like schoolyard bullshit where it's like, well, I get to punch you in the shoulder, then you can punch me in the shoulder. And, if it's just a tap, like that horse shit. Oh, excuse me. Challenging of, who's the bigger man, or you've got a man up. Like, and that is the heart of this. I think it's actually, other than the somewhat anachronistic storyline with Essel, because, there's no way some noble of the 12th century would be going, oh, yeah, no, sure, you know what, that sex trade worker will be your wife. It's like, no, I will marry who I negotiate to marry, who better be bringing me money or land, preferably both. So that part was anachronistic, but still kind of a sort of old school idea of manhood that is about being tough enough to you got to be able to take what you dish out, that you got to be noble with the girl who apparently just wants to get married. I think that, I don't think it's simplistic, but I think it is, what we're now calling toxic. And it's also like, I would have loved to have seen more of a deconstruction of this myth. And that's, I think, if I have a disappointment, I still think it's worth watching for all the reasons I said before and more. But if I'm disappointed with this film, is that it basically is a pretty straight ahead retelling of the myth, or of the original tale, very much a hero's journey, very much a Jungian exploration of the individual and how he becomes more of a man, how he's tested and he fails and he tests and he's just kind of scrabbling up, like to a point where he doesn't even know what, he's like, well, for honor, well, what is the point of honor? And he can't answer that question. It's like the guy who goes to university and it's like, why are you here? Well, the degree. Is that it? But what's the degree for? Like, he can't even get, when the teachers try to say, to learn something. Even near the end, he still kind of doesn't get, it's to be a man, and an anachronistic version of a man. There's no deconstruction of this myth. There's no criticism of the myth. There's no kind of going, hey, maybe the hero's journey is not what it's cracked up to be, unless maybe I'm really missing the point, and it's like to make a narrative so boring, such a boring hero's journey that no one wants to make the movie again, which I don't think is the point of this. So, yeah, but I do think that there is more. There is something real in this movie, and it bears examination, review, and criticism. Analysis.
Well, and part of that too is that, why did they make the movie? Well, it's in the public domain. It's King Arthur. There's no IP here. It's not like Star Wars where you have to buy the rights to it. You can go and make any kind of.
I don't think. Do you think A24 said we were looking for an Arthurian legend, or did David Lowery go, I want to talk about an Arthurian legend?
Well, I think regardless, you don't have to pay a screenwriter to do Arthurian legends. You can just
they had to pay Lowery. You do have to pay a screenwriter. There's still a script. But
this is not like, say you do a Superman movie and you have to pay Schuster and you don't have to pay the Superman creators in this. It's Arthurian legend. It's in the public domain. So you can make any film you want on Arthurian legend. Do you think anyone's watching?
It's like that is. Like, I don't even know why. I don't understand what you're saying here. I don't think that's relevant to why the film was made, why Lowery chose this. Like, if that was the case, we would just be inundated with in the public domain stories. And we're not actually. Like, this is the first Arthur thing we've seen in a decade. Yeah,
we did have that King Arthur kids movie that came out a year or two ago.
That was a good movie. The kid will be king. Hey, you know what?
The trailer
that was a nice little sweetheart kids movie.
But they didn't have to pay any royalties for it because it was in the
Well,
public
but nor did most movies that come out. Who's getting the big action for Vacation Friends or Free Guy or all the films you talked about still had a script. Somebody got paid to write the movie, just as this one was. David Lowery did the adaptation, but I'm thinking, other than Suicide Squad, was there anything else in your top 10 movies looking forward to that were based on anything? Might have been a book somewhere in there.
Yeah, I have the Aretha Franklin and Respect biopic in my top 10.
I
believe
she's still alive, isn't she?
No, she passed away in 2018.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
Recently, she passed away. Relatively recently, but
there'll be an estate that is going to get some money.
Yes, but much like the religious biopics of the '60s, there's a lot of the big religious epics from the '60s. If you're basing a movie off the Bible, there's no residuals from the Bible.
I know, but I don't think that it had anything to do with this movie being made. It's an interesting fact, but it's not a causal fact. What I'm saying here is I believe it's a specious variable. The one doesn't follow the other because there's all kinds of movies that have IP, like a previous, based on a book or whatever, but there's a million that aren't, and both get made. This thing, if they wanted to make it big, like Gladiator or any of these other things where they wanted to make it big, then we would have gotten a much different movie. But whether or not it was based on something where they didn't have to pay an estate or a rights holder, I don't think had anything to do with them making this movie. Why?
What is A24? It's not a huge studio.
But
they do tend to do smaller art house kind of fun,
but do you
good movies.
Honestly, do you really first of all, I suspect a lot of their films are still based on somebody's book. An arty book, but a book. Somebody got paid rights. But again, I don't think they were we don't have to pay rights. Let's make an Arthur movie. From what I understand, the film was developed and A24 was one of the later participants. I
would need to do a lot more research on, but as to why it was made, part of it too is the more expensive it gets, the more difficult it is to get made in a lot of ways. I know,
but you're it is. It's why A24 doesn't make big movies. Period.
No, they make a lot of good movies. But...
So this, whether or not it had any IP attached, A24 would only make, let's say any of these players, Braun Studios, et cetera, none of them are making a movie that they can't afford. But, whether it's some old legend or a folktale or anything else, I don't think it's material to the discussion of the film in and of itself. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's one doesn't, it's apropos of nothing.
I think that's
my feeling.
I would disagree a little bit in terms of, especially when you have rights holders, there's always, they always say that film is the most collaborative sort of artistic medium out there. And when you're talking millions and millions of dollars just to make even an indie film, you're talking about a lot of money that's on the line for an artistic vision. So I do think that is part of the discussion for any film, whether it's a gross out comedy like American Pie or like this film. I do think that budgeting and IP and how expensive it is, whether it's a quadrant tentpole film like a Jurassic Park or Jurassic World.
But we know we're not talking about that here. Like, I don't even get why you brought it up. Like, especially when we're talking about the meaning. Oh, well, did you know? Like, it's like, well, that has nothing to do with anything here. Nor, I don't even think it has anything to do with the discussion of the film other than, yeah, like I just, that I'm totally stuck on, man. I don't get how relevant that is when we're analyzing this film. Like, that it didn't have IP attached. So what? What if it did? Like, I'm trying to think. Let's take a look at, okay. Blah, blah, blah.
What are you looking at?
Okay, The Bling Ring, A24 movie. Jesus Christ, that was about actual people. Like, people who are still alive.
Yeah. And like, actually not a bad film, too. Pretty
well, yeah, but what I'm saying is that, like, A24 will pick a film that it can produce, period. That this didn't have it is almost like, well, that's an interesting side note. Not really material to the conversation. Like a bit of trivia, a footnote at best. Because it's like got nothing to do, like it does not affect how we discuss the film. Well, other than right now, because I can't fucking let it go. All right, let's move on, because we're wasting goddamn time here. First I want to say, Burja Rokar, good to see you, man. He chimes in. He says, he's got to say it is so disappointing to hear this film didn't turn out well. Still haven't seen it, but I was excited for it and hoped it would be spectacular. Well, listen, Burja, you got a difference of opinion here between me and my friend. What I recommend is when this is in replay or when I cut it into a review, yeah, like I recommend you see it. I think there's something worthy of a view here. Brian feels the absolute opposite. You look at him, eh?
Save your money. Save it.
Yeah, I'm saying spend your money. Now, mind you, I went to a cheap urban theater, a downtown theater, so it didn't, like, my snacks cost me more than my ticket. Almost more than twice, 2.5 times what my ticket cost. So take my recommendation with a grain of salt.
Well, and look, this is a film that I am.
Ahmed, it is the guy from Slumdog Millionaire. Dev Patel stars. Yeah. So go on.
Look, I am a huge proponent of saying go watch movies in theaters. I especially love going to theaters that show independent movies, smaller movies, absolutely going into the cinema and supporting the filmmakers and the stories that you want to see. This is not one of those films, though. To me, it's not worth, like for example, this is a film that was not available on streaming. I couldn't just, go on my TV and go to the on-demand and buy it on streaming. I had to go to the theater. I'm not saying that's a good or bad strategy, but that is an interesting thing when we're talking about watching this film, that they're making it to where you have to go to the theater to watch it, and it's not an option.
Or wait it out. Wait a long time.
Yeah, wait if you are going to watch it. If you need to watch it right now, go see it in the matinee. It's definitely not worth paying full price, though. And like a lot of movies, like a lot of summer blockbusters are popcorn movies that, if you are going to watch it, okay, that's the time to watch it, is in theaters and pay the whatever. But this is, the visuals aren't even all that strong, so I'd say skip it.
I would argue this is not a popcorn film. It's not a big summer blockbuster.
No,
it was meant to come out in 2020 in May. It would have been in the theaters and gone in a month. The fact that it, according to Lost to the Real, Sean, he's saying, where is it? Damn it. I hate it when everything moves around. There we are. Sean says, The Green Knight is one of A24's biggest moneymakers so far. But I wonder if that is in part, it looks good. I would argue the visuals are great, but it's not action, but it's got a rich look to it. And people are just so starved for movies like Oh, look, Green Knight. Look at the axe on that man.
You know, and ironically though, I would say
halfway
the visuals, some of the visuals are not all that great because the darkness, because of all the digital quality to it. You know, darkness on digital does not look like darkness.
I thought it
on
was.
film.
I thought it looked pretty goddamn good throughout. But
when you could see the picture, yeah, but
we
a
disagree
lot of it was
on
dark.
that again.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got a few comments. Let's take a look at some of the comments before we move into our end game here. First of all, we've got here. I wanted to comment on this. So, Lost of the Real, Sean says, yes, more meaning than story. That is one of my many struggles with this film. I'm wondering if, to paraphrase a criticism that's been made of, paraphrase a criticism I have made, but I got it from others. Oh my goodness, what the hell is the man's name?
What film?
A DCEU. Oh,
Zack Snyder?
Thank you. Zack Snyder, one of the criticisms that's been made of him, including by me, one of the things I've said about him is he has unearned moments. Like that kind of a moment without meaning. So there'll be hardly any setup, so it's unearned, but then there's this big grand moment. But it falls flat, in my opinion, because there was no meaning in it, because it wasn't earned. It wasn't set up. So you don't go, why is this moment important? I should know what it means. Here, in a way, it's so laden with meaning, but there's not enough narrative to kind of feel like it gets in your bones. Like there still has to be that emotion. Like emotion locks in that meaning. I know some people like to conflate the two. I think a good narrative kind of gets you in the emotional mood to accept the meaning and kind of have it lock in to encode the memory, the feeling, the experience. And so maybe that's one of the problems with this film is it's laden with meaning, but the narrative just doesn't get you there. You know, it's theirs for you. Somebody being super friendly would say, but it's there for you to discover. Mostly it's like, well, you're just kind of stuck in a scene having to figure it out for yourself. Me, I've read right over here. I have both my copy of A Hero with 1,000 Faces, because I'm that guy. But I think even more, if you want to understand this film, it's the writer's journey, which is kind of a breakdown of that mythic structure, but specifically for screenwriters. And I have some other books that are relevant.
The cover art on that thing looks like the little plastic piece that you put in the LP or the single to make it.
It does kind LP. Or no, when you bought it for the 45s.
Yeah, the smaller record so that it plays in the bigger rail, but it doesn't sound like the Chipmunks. That's sort of what that cover art looks like. But but okay. Look, you know, it's one of those things too. When you're going on the hero's journey, that you know, when you have where it's largely one person going on a journey, it's a lot harder to keep up momentum and journey and story. Like for example, if you have Tom Hanks in Castaway, that's largely Tom Hanks and a volleyball. If you have Reese Witherspoon in Wild, that's largely her walking around the PCH. And yet both of those, you see a really good journey. You see a lot of good storytelling. You see a lot of character growth. And I don't see any of that in this film. It's not.
Well, I think I already described how it works. So I'm.
Yeah. But
well, but that's what I think that's what I mean, though, is there's not enough narrative to get you to the meaning. Like there just should be a little bit more action, maybe.
And a more of a journey. I mean, the journey from Well, like
The
you would say
journey
callow
is
youth, I would say
there.
douchebag to adulthood.
It's
You know, I'm
there.
not. There's something there, but is it Tom Hanks learning to not watch a clock?
All right.
Yeah. I would disagree.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're comparing apples to oranges. Like just straight up. That's not, other than, oh, here's a good movie, here's a movie you don't like, here's a movie you liked. But yeah, you gotta look at other hero's journey movies. And yeah, Castaway is not a hero's journey. Definitely a survivor story, but anyway, back to Sean. He says, I'm interested to see how this film's legs are at the box office with how audience reactions have been. Yeah, I'm kind of curious at how much, like, it's a weird one. Who watches A24 movies? Not many people. Like, I mean, that's kind of that's a thin part of the market. He's a 6.7 million in box office this weekend, which is remarkable. I'm looking forward to Dan Murrell's show Monday when he catches us all up on the weekend box office.
He does a really good one, and so does Grace Randolph in terms of she calls it movie math, or I think.
Yeah, and I can't stand no. I will not be watching Grace.
Not a Grace fan. Okay.
Not at all.
But yeah, I agree with Sean a lot there. It'll be interesting to see what the second weekend box office is for this film. Normally you could say a lot of independent movies, word of mouth is big, and you can see box office grow moderately over a couple of weeks. I don't think it's going to be the case here. No. Yeah. Sean is also not a fan of Grace Randolph.
Well, or maybe he's like, maybe he's a fan and he's upset that I'm not a fan. Who knows? All right, coming back to okay. Before we get into the director David Lowery and the final thoughts, it is now time to announce what we're going to be looking at next weekend. And so I'm going to shamelessly take over the screen and mute my good friend, Brian. This is where he can now swear on and on about how stupid I am and how I don't know what I'm talking about, especially when it comes to the Green Knight. Swear away, Brian. You're stuck in the green room. Able to do nothing. Nothing about it. Nothing. All righty. Anyway, enough of that entertainment. Okay, next week, first of all, I do want to remind everyone, as I said before, the Reframe Stamp is a project of the Reframe Project. And fortunate enough that their executive director, Andrea Wilson Mirza, even has agreed to join us at the top of next weekend's show for a 15-20-minute interview, talk about the history of the Reframe Project, the Reframe Stamp, why the folks, Women in Film et al., started this project. And Jim and I, of course, will talk about why we think, why it's important for us to use it as a tool when we're analyzing a film. Now, as far as what we're going to be watching next week, though, it did come up on DMG's list at the top of the show. It was actually not, and it came up in his top 5, not even within his top 10. It was only number 4. But I think that's I'm actually appreciative of his metric. I'm somewhat ambivalent about this film myself, but next week we're going to be taking a look at Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad, 2021, that version, next weekend, and And yeah, we'll be right back here, 9:30 Central Daylight Time, August 8th, for both that interview, which I'm super jazzed about, with Andrea Wilson Mirza, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, and to take a look at Suicide Squad, which I am weirdly ambivalent about. But here we are. Maybe it's just, I feel like it's like, God damn it, we get to go to the movies. I want to go see another movie. All right, now let's bring my good friend. Apparently, he's still swearing about me.
No.
Unmuted yet.
It will be interesting to see too whether the doll of Beck or the Beck doll test. I don't know, like the
Bechdel
singer.
Test?
Bechdel test? Because it looks like it's like I don't know if there's more than one woman in the film. I mean, unless Amanda Waller talking to Harley Quinn counts as passing that or not. But it seems like it's,
as long as they're not talking about another guy, it passes. All you need are two women characters in a scene talking to each other, and the subject of the conversation isn't a man. It's one of the reasons oh my goodness, Sean's leaving us, and we still haven't talked about David Lowery. Sean, thank you so much for popping by. Look forward to your review of the film. Now that I've gotten this out of the way, I'll look it up, or maybe haven't produced it yet, which shocks me if that's the case. I'll find it. I'll watch it. I've gotten Brian's review, but I'd love to hear what you think. But anyway, thanks, man, for popping by. Okay, where the hell were we? What were we talking about? Brian?
The Bechdel test?
Oh, Bechdel test. Oh, why it failed in this movie is you see the witches talking to each other. I'm like, oh, well, that's, it's like, oh no, they're talking about the spell. It's all about Dev Patel's character. It's all about Gawain. And then even later when Essel is birthing his kid, well, it's still about him. It's all about him. And so it fails on that mark. And then, of course, yeah, it's a male star and a male director. So it's like, yeah, no, it's not getting
King
a
Arthur.
reframe stamp.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, yeah, it's King Arthur where it's all dudes. So it's hard to not, or to hard to get a stamp, I guess.
I think that, and maybe that's, well, okay, here. Let's move forward. We have got the director. Why don't we talk about him first? Would you give him... Now, here's an interesting question. And actually, you know what? I'll answer first so you can think about it. Regardless of what I liked and didn't like about the film, yeah, it's a unified vision. It's not confusing at all. It's a really straightforward, like it's a pass for the director. Even though I'm not necessarily, I don't think I came out of this film a fan of David Lowery's. I think it's in some ways any of these things about, as much as I'm interested in the hero's journey, the fact that he wasn't deconstructing it in a way, it's just really kind of praising this idea of masculinity, makes me, if I was a fan before, less of one or not one now. I have to give him a pass. In no way could I argue that it wasn't the result of a unique and specific idea, vision, etc. So I'm giving him a pass. What about you, my friend?
No.
Oh, he just fails throughout. It so didn't work for you.
He clearly put a lot of effort into this film. He's clearly a talented director in terms of getting people on the same page, and the film is a director's medium, obviously. But if part of that is not just executing a vision, but the vision itself, I would say the vision for this film fails, and it's the pacing, the biggest part of it for the reason why it fails. I generally don't have a problem with the male being a man kind of thing, unless it's poorly done. I don't have a problem with that being part of this. It's just overall this film is so slow. It's such a slog.
I think you were going to say boring.
It's
I believe you're going to say boring.
It's boring. It's
okay. So, my friend. Okay, before we get into final thoughts, we did have a late joiner in the stream. My co-host, Jimbo C, asking what about the Olympics? Good to see you here, man. I hope your travels have been safe. I know you've run into some personal hiccups, but it is great to see you here, Jim. And as far as the Olympics, I am proud to say I have watched none of it. I am aware of almost next to none of it. I hope this will be a trend in my life, that I just ignore the Olympics for the rest of my natural life. I am full up. I have had so much professional now experience with large national and international sporting events. I'm like, they can all kiss my ass. There you go. F FIFA, F the IOC, they can all... I may have to blur that a bit. But, yeah. Anyway, here, let's give a wave to Jim.
Hey.
All right.
I like the Olympics.
I do. I like that last one. I like the Olympics.
It's fun.
I'm like that drunk uncle who goes on a tear about grandma's or the neighbor's apple pie, and so you're there like it's all kind of calmed down, and everyone's looking at each other, and you're like, I like apple pie.
Yeah, you're. And another thing about the Olympics.
Let me tell you about those bastards and what
those guys waving the flag. What are they thinking?
They still owe me money. Okay. Yeah. Final thoughts, man.
Skip it. This is this is a film that they made good effort on it. They didn't blow $200 million on this film, but it's so slow. The pacing, there's just not enough story there. I love a good hero's journey. Star Trek or Star Wars is a hero's journey. This film is not Star Wars. This is slow. I mean, you could say it's purposeful, but it's just so slow. It's so boring. And again, I fell asleep 3 times in this film, and I was really looking forward. Three times for a 3:00 movie. I fell asleep in this film. So, I'm trying to think of the last time I fell asleep in a movie. Like Avatar: The Last Airbender, I fell asleep in. A few others, but not many. So the fact that I fell asleep in this movie alone is reason not to watch it. Skip it. Save your money. Watch something else.
I hear ya. For myself, I would say I do. I think it'll actually reward watching, and I am actually kind of looking forward to when this comes out. I'm not going to go see it in the theater again. I'm like, well, I've had that experience. So it'll come out on streaming. It'll be on Netflix soon enough, or one of the 82 other services I subscribe to. But I look forward to seeing it again. I wonder if I am going to file this away with 2001: A Space Odyssey, or some of these others where it's like, upon second look, it's like, wow, this is still a pretty dry and uneventful film that, for whatever reason, sticks around. Yeah, it'll be interesting to look at it in a couple of years or in 5 years and kind of go, okay, does it stick? Is this one of those things that sticks even as an artier, stylistic view of the hero's journey? You know, again, I can hear the critic or the English major saying, stripped of its narrative artifices, stripped of narrative artifice, stripped to its bare psychological elements. I could see somebody writing that now. But I'm kind of curious. And I do think that, especially if you're a fan of the hero's journey as a way to look at life, I think this will reward you. Are you, though, and again, is this a film meant to entertain? No, it is not. Are you looking for, wow, that was a great couple of hours? Well, look elsewhere. You got to be into the psychological. You got to be into the style. I would not. I'd be really careful about if someone said, "Hey, is it any good?" I'd probably have 20 questions I'd ask them before I'd go, "Yeah, spend your time and money." And again, I'm not. Even though I disagree with you vehemently on a lot of this stuff, Brian, I'm not walking away going, "Fuck, that was awesome." No. I cannot say until that last act where it did it had a beat, it started to move. Up to that point, it's like I wasn't as bored as I was like in the Justice League, the remake, the Zack Snyder's Justice League. There I was just bored the whole goddamn time. Here I was less bored, kind of slowly started to grow on me. And again, a couple days later, I'm like, fuck, that wasn't that bad. There's something more in here. The more I think about it, the more I find in it. And again, the more I have a problem with it thematically. But even that, I think I can have a film I thematically disagree with and still can kind of recommend, because it's like, it gets me fired up. It has a firm opinion about things. And I can disagree with that and still say, well, this isn't bad. Anyway, whatever.
I think
what are you excited about? What do you got coming up on the horizon, man?
I have a couple of videos planned for this week related to the Suicide Squad. One of which is...
Ooh, are you going to do one of your... hey, you saw him here, or you'll see him in Suicide Squad. This is where else you'll see him?
Yes. So
awesome.
I'm doing a little twist on that. So I did one of those videos like that, and I'm calling them, Where Have I Seen Blank Before? Because whenever you're watching a movie with your parents when you're a kid, there's your mom or your dad turns to you and goes, where have I seen so-and-so before? I'm not quite doing that for this picture. I thought about doing that, but what I'm doing instead is actually a first for my channel. I'm going to be doing a first credits version of Where Have I Seen Before, because there are so many people in this film whose credits go back 15, 20, 30 years. I'm going onto IMDb and I'm looking up.
Where have you seen Idris Elba? Well, let me count the 52.
And that's one I couldn't even find a picture of it with Idris Elba. So I'm going to mention it. Most of them, it's a lot of grainy old pictures, but Idris Elba is an interesting one because that one is he plays a parachuting instructor on a 90s British sitcom. And I found the opening credits for that sitcom from that season, but there's no still pictures of him from that episode. There's not even a picture from that episode. So I need to do some more digging there. But yeah, Idris Elba's first credit was as a...
Very cool.
I forget the exact list.
When will that be coming out?
That'll be coming out Tuesday, Wednesday-ish, whenever I can get it.
Very cool.
Whenever I can get it done and processed. I've downloaded all the stuff I need to get, and I just need to record my track and start editing tomorrow. So it should be a lot of fun, because as I was looking up all these things, like finding, like for example, the guy from Cliffhanger, guy with the curly hair. I'm blanking. Anyway, his first appearance was in a pilot.
Stallone? Sylvester Stallone?
No, the guy on Mary Poppins, y'all.
Oh my God!
The blue skin, the
yeah, I know who you're
where he
talking
whistles
about.
and the arrow comes at you. I forget. I'm brain farting on his name, but
He was in Cliffhanger, huh?
yeah, he was the boyfriend that loses the girlfriend for when Sly's like "Rawr," and drops her.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so his first appearance was in a television pilot from 1986 with Dennis Farina as a police captain in a 50s mob boss thing. So
okay, you're basically now going to tell us your whole videos.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm cutting you off there. Cutting you
a
off
lot of fun.
there.
Look it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's watch the video. Hey, let me tell you all about the video I'm making. Okay, so, Brian, we'll find you on Instagram mostly at Dragon Movie Guy. In the description, folks, is a link to his top 10 movies looking forward to this month. Of course, his channel, and of course his handle on Instagram and Twitter at Dragon Movie Guy. Go subscribe to him now. Otherwise, you'll miss the video that he just spent the last 5 minutes giving us the specific details. So it's almost like you don't need to watch it. But anyway, Brian, I want to thank you again very, very much for being on the show, for pinch hitting for Jim, for sharing half your list with us exclusively. That was super duper awesome. And I know we're going to have you back, if only to maybe have round 2 on when they do Gawain and the Green Knight rematch.
Redux Part 2.
Yeah, Part 2 was Hamlet Part 2, which I thought was a brilliant film and just a brilliant way to take on something like that. All right, folks, I think it's time to say again, thank Jim, thanks for popping by. Sean from Lost in the Reel, thank you very much for coming by. Ahmed Jelly Duck, our man in Kuwait, thanks for popping in. Of course, Shashank, our man in Chennai, because we're a global chat, baby. It's one of the reasons this is the home of the best chat on the internet. And who else? Oh, Richard and Katie. Again, although they haven't seen the film, they did come by, and it's all watch time, so it's all good. Anyway, thank you both very much for coming. And once again, Brian, DMG, thank you very much for coming. Can you hang out in the green room? Wait for me as I wrap everything up. Thank you very much, sir. All right, I'll say goodbye to you. And then everyone else, I think I'm just gonna... Yeah, I think it's time to basically wrap this one up. Thank you all very, very much for coming. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate you watching. And again, just to remind you, next week we're looking at the Suicide Squad that will be coming out on Friday here in Canada. Sunday night we'll be overanalyzing that. And if you wouldn't mind throwing a like, maybe ring the bell after you've subscribed, that would be appreciated. But other than that, I think we're good. So I am going to turn down the tunes, and let's cue the credits.